Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. As you might know, this is our second event for the student chapter, Northwest Student Chapter. And, you know, I'm so thrilled to have you here, even though we know that, you know, there's a lot of events happening and such, and load shedding, contesting with that as well. So happy to see all of you. Today, I'm really excited to introduce Gail Rongeman and her team. They're going to speak about coaching and consulting psychology. And I think this is a very vital tool in a toolbox of every IO psychologist, because you will be able to effect change and to make a difference where you are, or in your society, in your work environment, in a new way, in a different way than some traditional IOP approaches might have allowed you to do. So we are very excited to hear all about coaching and consulting psychology and the various facets and forms thereof. And Gail, you will also, or someone will also tell us about all the international contacts that we have in terms of this approach and fraternity. So without further ado, over to you, Gail.
Wonderful, thanks, Bo, and thanks for the invitation to share with your students a little bit about coaching and consulting psychology in the IOP profession and field. Yeah, there's quite a lot that we are doing and quite a lot to share. So our panel today is from our IGCCP SteerCom and also our mentoring subcommittee. So you'll see Amo, Tandiwe, Nomfelelo, Jenna, Stephen, and JP. We will all be giving you a few insights from our experience within the IOP profession, specifically from the area of coaching and consulting psychology. And I think the one of the main reasons, both of you said to us, is to connect you guys back to why you are studying, why you are, and you're studying the best profession. So don't let anyone tell you that this was the second choice. It's your first choice. Even if it was your third choice or your first choice. There is so much. The IOP profession connects you to a range of careers and skills and insights that I think is very valuable. So as we're going through some of the speakers and you'll hear from everyone, I think you can start connecting yourself to some of the opportunities and possibilities around what this particular profession opens up for you. So first off, I'm going to just give you a quick view, and I'm sure you know this, just a quick view of SIOPSA, IGCCP, and then mentoring. And then I'll hand over to Amo, who's going to start off with some of her insights. So what is SIOPSA? It's a member-based non-profit organization established to enhance industrial organizational psychology as a profession in South Africa. We're an independent body and we represent the interests of our members and profession while collaborating with and advising business policy and partners. So we work across a range of organizations. The various interest groups are quite active, and we partner with people like Bo as part of the regional connections. So we create awareness for the role and importance of our particular areas, like us as consulting and coaching. Work with the regional groups. We involved a lot with community projects and industry collaborations. And, you know, as student members, there's a lot of options within SIOPSA about how to connect with us and where to connect with us. And the mentoring, of course, is one area. And of course, our annual conference, which comes up 13th to 15th of July. It's an excellent conference to attend. There's a lot of orientation in terms of what it means to be an IOP, a lot of practical application, very good student rates. And we also often ask for volunteers. So if as a student you want to improve your networking and connection to people in the field, volunteer to work at the annual conference. Yeah, you get a lot of exposure. So the interest group, coaching and consulting, that's us. We work in 4 main areas. emerging psychologists, that's the mentoring, professional practice, that's for experienced IOPs, community of practice, and our list of coaching practitioners. We're involved with research, publishing, development of webinars and content, and then some of our strategic partnerships, which Bo also mentioned. We have quite a few international connections, which serve us really well in a number of areas. Oh, so sorry, I went on too fast. Wonderful. So that's a bit of an intro from us. And I hope you enjoy some of what we're going to share. I'm going to start off with Amor, who has been involved with us in the mentoring process as a mentee during her master's, a mentor now as a first-year intern, and now also on the organizing committee. So she can give us a lot of insight into the mentoring process and also her journey. So Amor, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amor Galang, but Amor's perfectly fine. I am currently completing my second-year master's in industrial psychology at the Northwest University, and I am also doing my internship with Top Talent Solutions. I'm not sure if you are familiar with that organization. So I think for me, before I even get to the mentoring and everything, just to, come across with the message that this is really a two-way dialect. This should be a conversation. So should you have a question while I'm, speaking, or any of the panel is speaking, please just, unmute yourself, raise your hand, and you're more than welcome to just pop your text, your question or your insights on the chat function as well. Okay, so yes, like Gail said, I was still am a mentee with IGCCP. So I think I saw an opportunity on LinkedIn of where this interest group was like, I'd be one student, for exposure, right? And I was sitting there as an honors student, and I'm like, this is what I'm studying. I'm doing my honors in industrial psychology, but there's so much I know, right? And there's so much to find out about, the field of industrial and organizational psychology. So those were the questions, or I think the questions that I kept asking myself, like, how do I actually get industry knowledge? Because I do have good theoretical knowledge. I do understand what IOP is and how I can utilize what I've already experienced, or gained rather, into the industry. Well, that's what I thought until I joined IGCCP, and in my journey as a mentee, I've learned so much about the workplace, what exactly it is, like you literally get practical experiences and firsthand experiences with people who have been in that industry that you've been studying for, you're passionate about for years and years and years. I think for me, I was like, I'm going to join, and I'm going to be intentional about my journey of finding out, do I really want to be an IOP for the rest of my life? So I think I just want to share that message across, that you are in the right place. And I really wish that, you take the spirit that you have of joining after hours and wanting to find out more about what you're studying. I think it's very beautiful. And yes, we thank you for being here as well. So basically, that is the mentorship program, where you join such a session and you get to ask whatever question that's been lingering that can't be necessarily answered during class, can't be answered by your classmates as well. So my advice, or someone advised me when I was doing my third year, that, do you have a friend that's in honors? And I'm like, no. Okay. Do you have a friend that's doing her master's? And I'm like, no. And that's when I'm like, okay, I need to actually connect from honors level, third year level. If I'm doing first year, I need to have a friend who's doing master's if I'm doing my third year. And when I got to my master's, I'm like, okay, now I need to have a friend that's in the workplace, and just, that's basically what mentorship is. You just put yourself in an environment where you get to, you know, suck all the knowledge that you can and utilize those resources as well. Basically just taking ownership of where you are, your career, what you want to get. And I think for me, I just want to say that you get to develop and you get to, you know, build on certain competencies that you will need, not only as a student, but once you get to the workplace as well. Yeah, so I think that is my advice, that thank you for being here, and just take on whatever opportunity to ask a question, whatever resource you might find. Connect, build your network. It's really going to put you and grant you so many opportunities as well. So I think, Gail, I've shared my bit as a young person in the industry. But for me, just to share I think the one thing I want to reiterate is utilize your resources. You are provided with resources, and just grow yourself, grow your network as well, and find a friend. If you're third year, find a friend that's in honors. If you're masters, find a friend that's in the workplace. Yeah.
Thank you, Amor. I think very wise words is find somebody always that's ahead of you that can introduce you into that network.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how you got yourself established, as you ask questions, connected with people, and got yourself involved. And I think that gives testament to how far you've got. So thanks, Amor, for that guidance. Wonderful. So I'm going to hand over now to Jenna Siegel. Jenna works in academia and consulting. We all IOPs, obviously. So Jenna's a qualified IOP as well. And she's going to take you through some of the many career options, because as I said earlier, as an IOP, we are really lucky. We have I think, one of the widest ranges of careers open to us. And Jenna's going to introduce us to some of those. Just tell me when you want me to share your slide.
Great, thanks, Gail. I hope you guys can't hear the inverter in the back of my sound. Basically, it might look gloomy. It's just the typical South African evening in load shedding. So welcome everybody. It's really lovely to have an opportunity to speak to you all. I really do encourage you guys. I want to actually get you guys to interact as much as possible. I know it's been a long day, but if you want to chat or answer some of the questions in the chat box, please go ahead. Gail, I'd love if you could share the picture. I thought let's make this a little bit more colorful than just my words. I saw this on one of my favorite resource pages or research social medias, which is LinkedIn. Okay, so if you guys aren't on LinkedIn yet, just as a place where you can connect with people, as Amo said, I would suggest you go on tonight and connect with every single one of the panel members here today, because you just have access to a lot of people who are in different areas. And as Gail said, I went down the academia route, and I'm actually in not even industrial psychology necessarily. I'm in the fashion industry at the moment. So I've gone through an interesting space, but started in training and development. And training and development is definitely a key aspect to what industrial psychologists do. And if you know a bit about training and development, what you know is that we develop individuals according, obviously, to their strengths and also to their development areas. And how do we do that? We assess and we go into psychometric. So one of the things that industrial psychologists can do that, HR generalists can't really have access to legally is through psychometric assessments that are registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. And I'm sure you'll hear about the HPCSA more and more as you get involved, because that's the governing body. So once you become involved with industrial psychology, because we have the label of psychologist, we need to be like any other psychologist. We need to have a little bit of accountability. And that's what the Health Professions Council of South Africa does. And part of that is to make sure that when we use psychometric assessments, like what you do when we help people to develop in the organizations, we give them personality tests, we can do abilities tests, we can do attitude, we can do any kind of cognitive, whatever you can imagine. Psychometrics is out there and it can give you insights into human behavior, but we have to do that responsibly. And part of that is, of course, through being registered to the Health Professions Council and understanding that our role in using psychometrics is a very special one. So training and development happens at every stage of an organization. And I think for me, it's always been what draws me in, because it's really about making sure that people in the organization have the best chance of reaching their potential. Okay, but there's also other aspects that you could go into. If you're more of an analytical, numbers-based person, you could go into behavioral analysis. So you could go into more of doing surveys and human research, which is also something that as industrial psychologists, we're very research-based. It's a science. So it's important that the numbers also happen, and that we are aware of the numerical and the percentages of people who are happy, who are meeting their goals in the organization, and that happens by making sure that we understand their behaviors through an analysis. I'll get to career coach in a sec. There's also, we're going to have one of the panelists talk about consulting. So you could be an internal industrial psychology consultant, or someone who comes from an external space. So that's, I'm always working for an external consultancy, for instance, that come in and they listen to what their client is, their real pain that they're having. And that pain is then listened to, and what you'll see is that they come in with any kind of ideas or ways in order to help their clients. The next thing, of course, is so you can go into academics. Of course, that's where I am. I'm a big nerd. So academics is really about enhancing the world of knowledge about what we know about human beings, coming up with different models, coming up with different ways of understanding the workplace. Okay, research is there again. Personnel psychology talks about, the day in and day out types of interactions that you would have with human beings in the workplace, and dealing with part of it is actually training and development, but also recruitment, which comes into selection systems over there, as well as industrial relations. So industrial relations comes in because when we are in the workplace, we're human, right? And sometimes humans need a little bit of help to get along with one another and to find their way in working in the workplace. And of course, you have coaching. So another route that you could take, and I must tell you guys, this is not an exhaustive list. This is quite broad as I'm going through all of it, but you can go into coaching and counseling even in the workplace, which is basically helping people to understand themselves and understand how to go forward. Different to therapy, obviously, because we don't do therapy as industrial psychologists, but we do allow people to take a bit of time for reflection and to ask powerful questions to move us forward in our careers. So those are some of the career paths that you could take. I don't want to go on too much because you can hear a lot more from our panelists. Oh, Gail,
wonderful. Thank you. Yes, no, thank you, Jenna. That was great. I was just checking if there was anything on the chat, but not. Thanks for your note on that, Amal. Excellent. Thanks, Jenna, for that overview. I think it's really good to start seeing where, as an IOP practitioner, you could actually land. So, so we're going to go into one of the areas a little bit more specifically with JP. JP van Zithout has been working in the consulting field for many, many years. I think both as an external and internal consultant. He's going to give you some more of a view of that from his perspective. So over to you, JP, and then just tell me again when you want me to share.
Cool, happy. Thank you everyone for having me tonight. I think consulting is always very exciting for me. I don't know if you guys have seen series and movies around consulting, and I think that's always been attractive to me from a consulting perspective. Like Jenna said, on the academic side is around doing the research and understanding human behavior, where on the consulting side is we use those models to say, how do we then support businesses to make better decisions around people? And you can be an internal consultant where you are an industrial psychologist in a business and you work with internal clients. I've been that before, where you work with your executive team and you understand what the challenges are. Or you can be an external consultant where you work maybe for a big consulting firm like Deloitte or PwC. And you're coming in as a consulting firm and you've got the resources behind you and you support the business, or you can go independently on your own. And there's a lot of businesses at the moment who are bringing in industrial psychologists, especially after COVID and the challenges that they're experiencing in the workplace, to say, we need a little bit more psychology and understanding of behavior in the workplace. So come and support us, bring in your statistical methods and behavioral understanding to help us support our workplace. So there's definitely, whatever career you want to follow, there's different options for you to go into consulting. Gail, you can put up my slide now. And what I wanted to just kind of talk to you is, obviously the spectrum of work you do in consulting is very broad, but I wanted to kind of just speak to the kind of the high level main areas of it. And when you go into consulting, you kind of become exposed to things you wouldn't normally be exposed to. And I'm kind of start top left, then work to bottom right. But top left, you can do generic consulting. So there's a lot of IOPs at Deloitte who consult on system implementations. You consult on Oracle or SAP implementations, and you kind of bring your behavioral understanding to that, but you kind of do generic consulting work, management consulting work. Then the next three there is more around you coming in and consulting with businesses to understand and support them. So the second one there is client focused. So as a consultant, you might be joining with a small business and they're struggling to service their clients effectively. So you're going to come in and help them understand the employee journey or the customer journey, and you kind of help them understand the behavioral side to it, and you consult with them to service their clients better. The third one, you consult to that business. So you're not working on their clients, you're actually consulting to them and fixing conflict in the workplace, bullying. You're trying to resolve business-centric problems for them but as a consultant. And then the third one, there's a lot of businesses struggle with administrative processes being run effectively. So you might come as an industrial psychologist and work on training and upskilling and understanding the demands of the job and doing an analysis to say, how do we support them? And you bring in psychometric assessments around how do they effectively run their processes in the business. Where the difference to the bottom left one there is where you start doing behavioral consulting is you're not really training people anymore. You're not training or upskilling them. You're actually sitting in the room and understanding, what's the systemic challenges you're experiencing and trying to help them understand how do you support them from a behavioral perspective. So it might be that there's an issue around leadership visibility, or there might be an issue around ethics in the workplace. And how do you then help them to craft an intervention to support them around addressing behaviors in the workplace, a culture work. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that you can work on where you try and merge cultures in different workplaces. So you can definitely, as an IOP, come in and support that from a psychology perspective. Then the little building there is kind of represents your organizational consultation. So that's your normal IOP where you design leadership, you do psychometrics, you do IDPs or development plans in the workplace. So you can definitely just do what would normally be seen as kind of traditional IOP work in terms of consulting on just kind of the normal stuff. But you can also start doing what some IOPs are doing, especially with data analytics and the need for people who understand data analytics in the workplace, is you can actually start doing statistical consultation work. Because like Jenna said, we are science-based, research enabled. A lot of businesses actually look to IOPs to look at how do we do statistical modeling in our workplace? How do we build algorithms? How do we do regression analysis in the workplace? Some of you might be master students, the statistical work that you do there. So there's actually a lot of IOPs who have actually found their niche in data analytics and understand the statistical need of it. And then the last one there are IOPs who work in medical legal, risk mitigation. They work in the courtrooms. There are actually industrial psychologists who specialize in America what they would call jury analysis. So they would look at the behaviors in the courtroom. How do we support the lawyers to position the court case effectively to the judge? So there's a lot of that that IOPs also do in partnership with what you would call forensic psychologists. So those are kind of the main consulting areas that you could kind of fall into. I just put examples there of some of the roles that IOPs would fulfill within these consulting roles. So they would kind of fulfill, like, the assessment lead in the business, or they would fulfill the consulting lead on a project, or look at a process consultant. Jenna spoke about kind of the positions, but and like an executive coach would also be in a role that would come in from a consulting perspective, or just like a technical statistical consultant that would come in. So don't box yourself to thinking, as an IOP, I need to just do HR work. There's a lot of work that's been happening in data analytics and statistical modeling and executive consulting and business consulting that IOPs add a lot of value to it. So I can use an example here. I was working for Deloitte. We were doing a massive system implementation, a SAP system implementation. And they had in the past gotten stuck with, how do we get people to actually use the system? With previous implementations, and a big role that the IOPs fulfilled on that project was understanding the cultural and behavioral landscape, and then how do we position the system to make sure that people actually use it and adopt it, which would be far from the normal HR work you would do. It's more specific to behavioral and systems. So yeah, that's kind of my story tonight. Hope you guys took something from it, but there's a big landscape out there in terms of work you can do as an IOP.
Excellent. Wow. That starts to give an idea of the breadth and depth of work possibilities and opportunities. Thanks, JP. Before we go to Tandiwe, I just want to check. I see some people answered on the chat, which is fantastic. Do you think all the questions are answered, or is there a question we need to answer kind of now before we go to Tandiwe?
Yes, there's a question from Ashley, and she says, is it possible to become an IOP if you study human resource management? And if so, how is it possible? What is the procedure to follow?
Right.
Okay.
And
I'm not sure.
Over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
Thank
I'll
you,
take
because
I'll
I
take
don't know
that
the
one.
answer to that.
So it is possible. It might just mean that you need to extend your studies for a while, just to make sure that all the psychometric related and statistics related modules are also now part of your curriculum. So it has been done in the past. So yeah, it is possible. It might just mean a bit of an extension to your study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's another one from Tsohofal. So she says, or he says, I wanted to ask if there are learnership programs for undergraduates.
I can maybe step in here. So definitely a lot of the consulting firms or businesses actually are looking for psychometrists or industrial psychologists, or there's a lot of companies who are willing to open up vacation work for guys who are undergrad. I would definitely say, reach out to these businesses. Like Jenna said on LinkedIn, connect to the people that you see working at the businesses and just ask them. Like I get requests a lot around, is there learnership or workplace exposure programs available? And we'll be like, yes, we have space, so come and we'll do it. Or, we might not at that point in time take in, but definitely engage with the people, ask them if there's any programs coming up. Some companies have formalized programs. So where you actually have a window where you need to apply, so you need to understand.
Oh, I think JP just had load shedding, but I just want to add on to what he said. I think the most important thing that he mentioned was you need to reach out, because I think when it comes to undergrad and honors level, if you want to apply for psychometry opportunities, there are plenty, but just start now in your first or second, third year, just reaching out to those HR companies and independent psychologists, people that have their own HR firms. I think for me, that's the one thing that just shows the hunger as well, because I don't think any independent consultant would be like, hey, I have a job opportunity. But if you reach out to them on LinkedIn as well, I think you can be granted that exposure, and I think that can help you in your journey or your career as an overall.
Yeah, sorry, I had some load shedding there in the middle of my sentence. So some of you already have load shedding. It just hit here, so apologies for that. But yeah, I think definitely the only way you would know is reach out, ask questions, and then understand what their process is. Well.
Excellent. Thanks, JP and Amor, for that consolidated answer. Seamless. Wonderful. So I think another area of real importance is HR and consulting. So Tandiwe is going to talk a little bit to us about that. She has her doctorate in organizational psychology. She was instrumental in setting up the mentor program. It was Tandiwe and me on the steps of UJ we started. And thanks to Amor and Famotso, who helped us establish this at Northwest University. So Tandiwe, you can explain a little bit about your kind of background and the options, medical legal, which I know you work in as well, but it's a little bit about the HR side as well.
Thank you, Gail, and good evening, everyone. I'm sure some of the students, particularly the younger ones, if they are in the group, actually even up to the master's ones, I'm sure some of the things that you've heard are both exciting, but also a bit intimidating, because you're thinking, where do I start? Once I get out of university with my degree, where do I start? Whether I'm in HR, whether you've got your degree as an IOP, and probably even master's as an IOP. But the truth is, you've got to start somewhere. And what my talk basically will be trying to give you that reassurance that some of us have had to start within HR as IOPs, but grow within HR before we could pick up basically on the landscape of IOP and go into the consulting field and grow in that consulting field as well. So I know we're talking to both HR students and IOP students, but just to give you a bit of a reassurance that there is very close collaboration. Once you've completed out there in industry, there's very close collaboration between what HR does and what IOP do when they consult with companies, because most of the work they do will probably land on the ambits of HR, or some of the work that they'll be doing will somehow be under the wing of HR and work very collaboratively with HR managers. So from that aspect, I just want to share my own experiences a bit, but also to elaborate that and I'm relating to the question that was asked earlier on, to say, if you are in HR, can you go and become an IOP? Yes, you can, but you need to extend a little bit. And even in the workplace, as an HR person, you have to work collaboratively with an IOP, because there are certain things that even if you qualified in HR, once you're in industry, for instance, psychometric assessments and the analytical work, the cognitive analytical work that typically is done by industrial psychologists, you'll find yourself being limited in that sense. So on the other hand, though, IOPs work very collaboratively and very closely with HR. And in my own experience, for instance, as a young IOP, which is also I think the message I want to leave you with, guys, is that you've got to start somewhere. Some of us have had to start from an HR, learning from HR, being an HR manager, even though you're an IOP, but to learn from HR and do typical HR work, because there is a bit of a difference in a sense that a typical HR person will look at taking actions, look at the whole ambit of HR, whether it's from recruitment, whether it's performance management, whether it's issues of compensation, the regulation, the setting up of the policies and the practices as an HR manager. That falls within the ambits and the KPIs of an HR manager. However, even though as an IOP, you work in some of those spaces, but as an IOP, the difference is that your focus area, in a way, is looking at the organization in its entirety. So it's organizational psychology as well as human psychology that you have to look at when you work with an HR manager. But you work collaboratively with an HR manager because you do also have to focus on making the workplace as desirable as possible and performance increases and as desirable as possible for the organization that you're working for. So whilst HR looks at basically the relationship between the employer and the employee and making sure that there's policies and practices that are put in place towards that, and making sure that HR delivers in terms of the organizational needs, whether it's in terms of personnel that are needed, whether it's in terms of training that is needed and the skills that are needed. You come in as an IOP from the perspective of saying, what is, in terms of the psychology, how is this person within a job fitting into the job? What is the culture of the organization, for instance? What is the climate within the organization? How can we make this employee that's holding this job work to their optimum and to their best, giving the organization and the climate within the organization? So those are some of the differences that you will find yourself. And I know I'm not so sure if I'm talking to people that are almost at their honors, if masters, that are ready to go into the area of work. But what I can reassure you is that you've got to start somewhere. And I know we've had, and the talk today is about consulting psychology and that, but you've got to start somewhere. And most of us, like myself, have had to start within HR and grow within HR before I could go into consulting on my own as an IOP on my own. So you've got to start somewhere. Start where you are and use whatever opportunities that are available to you. That's my just first advice. Start where you are, use the opportunities. If you find yourself having to secure an HR manager job, like I did in my case, go into that job, learn as much as possible within that job, and grow as an IOP, because once you step out of that job into an IOP role, you'll be much more informed when talking to and consulting at a later stage with even the very organizations that you might be consulting with. You find that you are more informed because you've had the opportunity of sitting on the other side of the table as an HR manager, probably seeking consulting services from an IOP. So yes, you've got to start somewhere. However, having said that, it does not necessarily mean that all of us have to go the HR route. Some of us do not necessarily have to go the HR route, depending on the opportunity that presents to yourself. Some of us have had, some people that I know have had the fortune of maybe getting employed by some of the big companies like your Deloitte, your Ernst & Young, which are typical consulting companies, but you start as a junior consultant and work under more experienced, more mature consultants and learn in that space. So you can also learn from that area. I think the bottom line is that use the opportunity at your disposal. If the opportunity is for a job within HR, take it and grow within it. If the opportunity is for a job where you basically go into consulting, take it as well. but take it realizing that there's a whole lot of learning that you have to do as you go along. I won't go into detail about internal and external own practice. I think some of that has been spoken about. That.
Wonderful.
Yes, that you can go either be an internal person as a consultant or an external consultant. So I won't go into that for now, Gail. I'm not so sure if I'm leaving out anything.
No, you've sorted. And your time is
Okay.
also up in a way.
Okay.
I mean, I know Sandiwe can talk with insight and depth for a long time. So always.
Okay. No, thank you.
No, I'm sorry. So perfect.
Thank you then, Gail. Let's just take the questions if there's any.
Yes, you've covered exactly what what we were needing. And I think there's also a lot to be said for what HR, the contributions of HR are now, given all the changes in the industry. I mean, it's up to HR to take through some of what we need. I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to talk a bit more about coaching psychology, which is a big part of our contribution. So over to Stephen.
Thanks, Gail. So I'm going to start with hi everybody. I'm going to start with a couple of definitions, some generic definitions of what coaching is, and then what coaching psychology is, and then I'll talk more. We'll move from the head and we'll go into the heart and the body. We'll talk from the body. So Gail, if you wouldn't mind putting up my slides, thanks. Okay, then. So coaching, generically defined, coaching is building awareness and taking responsibility is the essence of being a good coach, okay? Partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. That's the International Coaching Federation definition. Commence's definition, which is the Coaches and Mentors of South Africa, a professional, collaborative, and outcomes-driven method of learning that seeks to develop an individual and raise self-awareness so that they might achieve specific goals and perform at a more effective level. Next slide. Gail? Thank you. So generic definitions of coaching psychology, a systematic application of behavioral science to the enhancement of life experience, work performance, and well-being for individuals, groups, and organizations who do not have clinically significant mental health issues or abnormal levels of distress. Enhancing well-being and performance in personal life and work domains, underscored by models of coaching grounded in established adult learning or psychological approaches. And lastly, scientific study of behavior, cognition, and emotions to deepen our understanding and enhance our coaching practice. Okay, I think that's all my slides. Oh, there's one more. Okay, so now I'm moving away slightly from the generic definitions of coaching to a more embodied, integrated quote that I found which resonates a lot with me. So what is coaching? The underpinning essence of coaching. So the brain is a meaning-making machine. It pulls from our past experiences, old beliefs, ongoing fears, and present assumptions to instantly define what the senses take in. Coaching is therefore intended to examine the meaning people give to situations and to determine what else could be going on that would change their approach going forward. Thanks, Gail. If you could take the slides off. Okay. So now, just to take this a little bit further, so how does psychology fit into coaching then? So first of all, there's a lot of elements or areas of psychology that make up coaching. A lot of those definitions of coaching actually came from people who were counseling psychologists. They were the first people who formed in the British Psychological Society and the Australian Psychological Society, where the counseling psychologists were the first people who formed. They saw that coaching was a future, and they started articulating that. So there's social psychology. We look at our Bandura's concept of self-efficacy. There's neuroscience. There's understanding how it's important to be trauma informed, and neuroscience helps us to understand that. Positive psychology plays a huge part in coaching. Educational psychology, knowing how adults learn as opposed to how children learn, is very important. Counseling and clinical psychology, from a trauma point of view. Analytical psychology, ego psychology, and of course organizational psychology, where we're fortunate enough to whereas when I studied, it certainly wasn't a thing yet. It's also, coaching psychology also moves away from the medical model, the medical or pathologically focused approach, where the client is deemed to need to be fixed, and also where the psychologist knows best. So coaching psychology moves to a more client-centered, humanistic approach, where the client comes in and they're whole. They may be stuck, they may have reached a threshold where they don't know how to move forward or how to think differently. But they are, in a sense, they have the answers within, and they need to see how they think. They need to look at their own thinking to be able to shift it or transform it. So they work with their strengths and their experiences to move towards reaching goals and decisions that they couldn't think of before. So it's reframing, but also to grow their self-awareness so that they move towards ego integration and individuation. So there's a shift from an adult-child dynamic, where it's more pedagogic, where pedagogy is teaching children, to a more adult-adult or andragogic relationship and approach. Coaching, importantly, why it's important to have also a neuroscience and a concept of how the brain functions in terms of the reptile brain. We work very much in the world of work. Being vulnerable is not encouraged, and people don't always have the courage to be vulnerable, and it's not encouraged. And so coaching takes us out of our cognitive brain and takes us to a deeper level, where we look at our fears, our needs that aren't being met. It does work with emotions. And then we use that to be able to articulate and bring it back up to the logical brain. So we bring it to us a place of self-awareness. So perhaps looking at the difference between coaching and counseling, or coaching and therapy, a lot of people have this question. And one of the nicest examples that I heard came from a clinical psychologist. I asked them, I said, what is, in your opinion, is the difference? And they said, therapy is probably working from -2 to 1 or to 0. Counseling is probably working from -1 to 0. And coaching is working from 0 to +1, which I thought made a lot of sense to me. So we don't go, not everybody should be in coaching. If they have trauma related, if they have depression, if they are in a case of over-mobilization or immobilization, in other words, fight or flight, or sort of immobilized, they're kind of depressed in a sense, it's not the right time to coach them. They have to be at least at a -1 to 0 in order to move to that 1. And that's where positive psychology comes in. And lastly, there's different types of coaching. There's solution-based coaching, which is more problem-focused. It's transactional. It's achieving goals. It's about doing stuff, thinking differently so you can achieve something in a different way, changing ways of thinking so you can perform a function differently or a process differently. Awareness-based coaching is more person-centered. So it's not problem-focused, it's more person-centered. So whereas problem-focused is goal-oriented, awareness-based coaching is more person-centered. There always is a goal, there always is an objective, but it's not as specific, and it's more transformational. It's about being, who you are being, into seeing your triggers, your ego, recognizing your ego defenses, recognizing your ego ideal, and being able to recognize the triggers and what hooks us, and work with emotions to then transform and be differently. So that sums it up from my perspective. Any questions?
Thank you, Stephen. I think that gives you also an idea of the broad range of IOP and then the specific areas of specialization that are possible and the depths of the psychology that we bring into our offering. The fact that you are industrial and organizational psychologists says something for your skill set and what you offer in business. So I think if there are any questions, put them in the chat. I would love to hear from our last speaker of the day. This is Nomfulela Manaka. She's more recently qualified in the last 3 years now, Nomfulela, with a background now in medical legal and psychometry and assessments. So she's going to give a bit of a view about how to establish yourself in the field, a little bit from her perspective. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll either answer there or live once Nomfulela is finished. So over to you, Nomfa.
Good evening to everyone. I think all the speakers have said a lot, but I'm just going to take it from the perspective of the students to say, in order to establish yourself, I think the most important thing is that you have to be intentional from the first year of your studies. Because remember, guys, to qualify for honors, it's your marks. So from the very first year, you need to work hard so that you qualify, because you don't just register for industrial psychology and think that you'll become an industrial psychologist in 6 years. So in order to get into honors, it's your marks, then from honors into masters. And from there, into internship and practice or going into the world of work. And the most important thing I would say is research, whatever. Firstly, join SIOPSA as a student, because that's where you're going to get a lot of information with regards to this profession. And once you're a SIOPSA member as a student, you try and attend as many presentations as you can, attend workshops, because most of them are free for students. And in that sense, you'll be able to find your niche and try and network as much as possible, reach out, like Jenna said, go onto LinkedIn and contact professionals and find out as much as possible about the profession and make your mark, so that as you progress, you've already built relationships and it will be easy for you to find internships and any form of experience. So the most important thing is start now. That's all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Nomfulela. Lovely to hear from you. Perfect. So are there any other questions? The last question, well, Amor, you are more up to date with the questions on the chat than I am. Is
Yes, there's one question from Bo. It says, students often ask whether there is a place for coaching specific behaviors as part of a broader counseling approach.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've put one of my views in, but maybe Stephen, if you have something to add there.
Yeah, thanks, Amo. I personally think that the new leadership style is a coaching approach.
Yeah.
I feel that very strongly. It's kind of the way to communicate, regardless of what the objective or goal is. It informs the way we communicate in an emotionally intelligent way.
Right. Yes, Jenna also says leading through empathy. Yeah. Yeah. Although, I mean, that being said, we know that there's sort of situational leadership requirements. Hey, so sometimes being participative as a leader is not what the business or that particular industry needed at the time. So It's good to be able to adapt, but I think the issue is that we are able to consciously adapt and we don't fall into a pattern because that's our preference and it doesn't necessarily apply to what's needed. Any other questions, Amor?
Just to add to that, Gail, coaching as a concept requires complexity thinking, and it requires non-dualistic thinking. So we've always got to be in that curious mindset of seeing how the situation changes and adapt to that situation, as you said, Gail.
Yes.
It's a coach.
We don't have more questions, but I was just thinking now of the modules that I had last year as part of my coursework, and one of them was coaching, and we really did tap into that. I know like not a lot of universities offer coaching and coaching skills and counseling skills as well. So really it's just a reflection that really the Northwest University does equip you. So should you get to the workplace, you will be fully equipped, fully skilled in those different domains of industrial psychology.
Good. Yeah, good point. I think that's very, very relevant. Tandile, did you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to say one of my relatives is also in masters, and I think they are starting now to include coaching psychology as a subject, because she asked me to say, what do you know about coaching? Because I have a module for coaching. And they call it coaching and counseling, but there is coaching aspect in the curricula. So I suppose there are institutions that are starting to look into that.
Yes, it's certainly, yeah. In our day, there was nothing like that. We kind of had to
even
in
our days, well, I didn't do coaching, but I know when I did my master's, we did counseling.
Yeah. So can I add to it as well? At the moment, the coaching profession as just being a coach isn't necessarily like governed in the same way as psychologists do. So if you decide to study coaching and you decide to go through you can do it through various institutions. It is something that you don't really have to sign up with any particular institution, but there is an international coaching federation, and they do try to at least incorporate some of the really important skills and attributes that are needed in coaching and counseling. But yeah, we definitely have, it can become a role that we play, but it's, for us, we've still got the next level of being psychologists and having that governing body of the HPCSA.
Yeah,
exactly. So there's a difference between coaching and coaching psychology. So, and if you're a qualified IOP, you need to really think, do you need to go and register with all the coaching organizations, or if you registered with SIOPSA as an IOP, is that not enough? So it is a good question to ask. Amor?
Yes, we have one more question from Ingrid. She says, how does the role of industrial relations management fit into the scope of work of an internal or external consultant?
Can I take that one, Kim?
I think
absolutely. Is that, go for it?
Yeah, from an industrial relations, because industrial relations would govern the relationship between, for instance, your bargaining councils, your labor within the organization, and your employees. So I would suppose as an IOP, and an internal IOP where you are employed by the organization as part of the staff members, you would find yourself helping, but not necessarily from the bargaining perspective, because that's within the ambit of HR. HR will be leading that process. Perhaps you as an IOP, depending on whatever issue that is at hand, whether it's got to do with the relationships, interrelationship between staff members, whether it's probably issues of mental health and issues of discipline, where you have to look at the behavior. And because as an IOP, you are more on the analyst side in terms of the cognitive and the behavior and just the entire psychology of the employee as such. So you would work with HR, but not necessarily head or lead the process, because it falls within the ambit of HR from a disciplinarian perspective, generally.
Excellent. Thanks, Tandile.
I just want to add from my side. So as an industrial psych, and I'm just speaking from kind of work we've done in the bigger consulting companies, is, you know, as an industrial psych, a lot of work that you do within relation to IR is also understanding, like Tandile speaks around, you know, what are the behavioral aspects I need to take into account when I'm working in an industrial relations space. You know, if there's issues around discipline, if there's issues around conflict, if there's issues around almost like cultural differences and all that kind of stuff, you need to, as an industrial psychologist, understand the psychology around it, and then how do you support your HR colleagues
you. If there are any other points that you want to discuss or raise.
Well, I think some of us am experiencing a bit of a slow connection, but I'm a bit conscious about the time. So I'm wondering if we could maybe end the session. And let me just say thank you so much, Gail, for you and your team, the interest group of coaching and consulting psychology, for sharing with our students your expertise, your experience, your knowledge. Thank you so much for all the answers that you gave to the questions as well. And I would really invite the students to look at the webpage of SIOPSA, to snoop around there, have a look at the interest group, the IGCCP, all the wonderful things that you're doing and documents that you make available there. And then they can also join your Facebook and your LinkedIn group and pop an email if there's any specific questions that they might want to be answered from your side as well, if that's okay.
That would be lovely to stay in contact through our Facebook groups and also through the mentoring program. So thank you very much, Boa. I think that's been a wonderful session. Thanks for everyone as well. Just some incredible insights shared. And I hope you see the value of what you actually studied in your IOP career.
Let me just reiterate again that the interest group is actively involved with the Northwest University, Potch campus, as well as the Vaal campus, with honor students and also master students coming up a bit later. Am I right, Gail? So, so it's not just a once-off and something nice and, you know, chat a little bit for an hour. They really do invest a lot of their time, and it's for free. So they give back. They invest in our students, and we are so grateful. Thank you so much, Gail. And thank you for this wonderful evening. And I will make the recording available to those who could not join due to load shedding or poor connection.
Awesome. Thanks, Bo. Thanks for taking the initiative and setting it up. Have a lovely
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Goodbye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay warm.
Bye.
Be safe.
Thanks, Bo.
Thank you so much, everyone. Sure, it was nice to see you and all of you and hear your voices and see the pictures. I think it went well. We had some great questions. I hoped for a larger audience, but you know, we'll take what we can. So
yes,
yeah.
the load shedding impacts and the recording. Oh, maybe let's just stop the recording.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the load shedding has